He didn't carry a gun, he didn't wear a mask, but he stole more money than most bank robbers could dream of, and he did it while smiling. Matthew Cox wasn't a thug. He was an artist, a mortgage broker, a guy with a degree and a briefcase full of lies. He forged documents so perfect, the banks thanked him for the fraud. He invented people, dozens of them. They bought homes, signed loans, vanished, all while Matthew Cox pocketed millions. He was charming, polished, believable, until one day he simply disappeared. Not into the shadows, into another identity. By the time the FBI caught on, he was already someone else. And by the time they found him, he had rewritten reality so many times, he barely remembered who he really was. This isn't a story about guns and gangs. It's about the kind of crime you never see coming. A story written in ink, deception, and signatures that never belonged to anyone. He didn't break into banks. He broke into the system. And the system welcomed him in. He forged names. He forged pay stubs. He forged identities. But the most dangerous thing he ever forged was trust. He convinced lovers to become accomplices. He turned fake families into real criminal networks. And every time the heat got close, he became someone new. A new name, a new credit score, a new backstory, new fingerprints, new handwriting, new life. The only thing he couldn't outrun was the babysitter who knew something wasn't right. This is the true story of Matthew Cox, the man who made lies look legitimate and fraud feel like magic. And he almost got away with all of it. He was born in Florida in 1969, Matthew Bevan Cox, middle class, ordinary. Nothing special, at least not on paper, but from the beginning, something didn't fit. He had trouble reading, writing, staying still. Teachers thought he was lazy. His parents thought he just wasn't trying hard enough. In reality, he had severe dyslexia, undiagnosed and ignored. By high school, he was falling behind. Not because he wasn't smart, but because no one knew how to teach a kid whose brain didn't play by the rules. So he adapted. He learned to fake it. He'd memorize textbooks instead of reading them. He'd charm his way through class discussions, lie when he had to, smile when it mattered. And that habit, pretending, would stay with him forever. Cox eventually made it to the University of South Florida. He studied art, not law, not business, art. He wasn't interested in math or science. He wanted to paint realism, specifically. Hyper-detailed portraits, things that looked real, even if they weren't. He graduated with a fine arts degree. But there was one problem. Art didn't pay. And Matthew Cox wanted more than just to get by. He wanted money, success, recognition. But mostly, he wanted to prove something. So he pivoted. He took a job in insurance, then mortgages. And that's where the lie started to grow. The boy who used to fake his way through spelling tests had just found the perfect playground. The mortgage industry in the early 2000s was a feeding frenzy. Banks were handing out loans like candy. Paperwork barely mattered. If you could type it, you could get it approved. And Matthew Cox, he knew that better than anyone. It started small. A little credit boost here, a fake W-2 there. He told himself it was harmless. Just helping people get homes the system said they couldn't afford. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He was testing the line and seeing how far it would bend before it snapped. Soon, the helping stopped, and the real fraud began. He forged employment letters, created fake bank statements, even wrote glowing reference letters from companies that didn't exist. He'd set up fake phone lines so banks could call and verify everything. It was airtight, brilliant even. And the lenders? They bought it, every time. He wasn't just fooling banks, he was fooling entire systems, credit bureaus, underwriters, title companies, everyone. And when it worked, when the wire transfer hit, he felt untouchable. He'd buy properties under fake names, take out multiple loans on the same house, using different identities, collect the money, then walk away before the smoke even started to rise. He called it shotgunning. The banks called it disaster. In 2002, he slipped up. Got caught altering documents. Probation. That's it. No jail, no handcuffs. Just a warning shot. Most people would have stopped, taken the scare as a sign. But not Matthew Cox. He left that courtroom with one thought. If I tighten the details, I'll never get caught again. So he did. New names, cleaner paperwork, better stories, sharper lies. The boy who once faked his way through school was about to fake his way into millions. He didn't need ski masks. He didn't need guns. He needed a laptop, a printer, and a mind that never stopped bending the truth. After his first slap on the wrist in 2002, most people would have gone straight. Matthew Cox went smarter. He wasn't going to stop. He was going to perfect it. The key? Not the paperwork, not the lies, the identity. Because if the name on the line doesn't exist, then neither does the crime. So he created new people, from scratch. Not just aliases, lives. He'd start with a name stolen from someone who wouldn't be missed, usually dead. Often a child who passed away young, never got a credit history, never left behind a digital trail. Then he'd build a fake birth certificate, a driver's license, a social security number, all doctored, all believable. He studied fonts, paper textures, ink bleed, learned how to age a document so it didn't look too new. He bought identity kits online, but the real magic came from his own hands. He changed his own handwriting for every alias. Dozens of signatures, each one unique. Each one real enough to fool the system. One day he was Joseph Carter, an up-and-coming real estate investor from Atlanta. The next, he was Charles Martin, a quiet veteran trying to settle down in Tampa. He didn't just fake names, he faked lives. He'd register businesses under false identities, real LLCs, complete with websites and voicemail boxes. He created fake employers with fake HR departments, installed phone lines in rented storage units so banks could call and verify the lies. They always checked the boxes. He made sure of it. And when they called, someone always answered. Because that someone was Matthew Cox. He had a script for everything, a voice for every name. He was the employer, the landlord, the reference. And no one questioned it, because the paperwork looked too good. He didn't cut corners. He polished them. He even created credit histories from nothing. He'd open small accounts under a fake name, buy groceries, pay on time, wait a few months, then level up to car loans, mortgages, cash advances. By the time the bank saw the file, it looked like someone who'd been alive for 35 years. Responsible, employed, trustworthy, a ghost with good credit. And that's when he'd strike. He'd walk into a bank dressed like a professional. Tailored suit, shiny shoes, a confident smile that told you, this guy knows what he's doing. He'd hand them forged tax returns, pay stubs, reference letters. All flawless, all fake. But the thing that sealed it, he believed the story. He believed he was Joseph Carter, that the condo was his, that the documents were real. And when you believe it, they believe it. He wasn't lying, he was acting. And the world gave him a standing ovation. Every time the wire transfer cleared, he felt it again. That rush, that godlike thrill of outsmarting the system. Of watching the machine say yes to something that should have screamed no. And then, before anyone noticed, he was gone. A new name, a new home, a new story. He didn't just escape justice, he evaporated. But the one thing Cox didn't know, every name he created was another thread leading back to him. He never carried a weapon, but he had one secret tool that made him more dangerous than most con men alive. Charm. Matthew Cox didn't kick down doors. He walked right through them, smiling, confident, polite, and unforgettable. He wasn't just good with paper, he was good with people. Too good. That's how the real fraud grew, not from forged W-2s or fake phone lines, but from the hearts he hijacked. Because eventually, Matthew stopped working alone. It started small, a casual date here, a flirtation there. He'd buy flowers, tell stories, laugh at the right moments, make them feel seen. And then slowly, he'd invite them in. At first, it was harmless. Can you pick up this document for me? Mind signing this package? But then it escalated. "Can you open a bank account in your name? Can you help me with a real estate deal?" They weren't criminals. Not at first. They were lovers. Friends. Women who thought they were building a life, not running a scheme. And by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The money was already moving. The lies were already theirs too. And leaving him meant facing charges alone. So they stayed. Some because they were afraid. Others because they still believed him. And the most loyal of all? Rebecca Houck. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She became his second brain. His voice on the phone lines. His partner in everything. They moved together like shadows. Swapping cities. Swapping names. Setting up mail drops and phone numbers in state after state. She'd help him buy properties under aliases. Pose as his wife on forged documents. Even answer calls pretending to be an employer. Together, they became a two-person empire, a mobile identity factory, a traveling real estate syndicate built entirely on fiction. They lived in condos bought under lies, drove cars leased with invisible income, drank wine on balconies financed by ghosts. And at night, they'd lie in bed and plan the next one. Where to go, what to call themselves, which story to sell next. It wasn't love, it was co-conspiracy. But to Matthew, that was even better. He didn't want someone to hold his hand. He wanted someone to hold the lie with him. And Rebecca, she held it tight. They didn't just fool lenders, they fooled everyone. Neighbors, realtors, lawyers, even family members. And when one identity wore thin, when the bank started asking too many questions, they burned it down and built another. A new address, a new story, a new scam. They were a Bonnie and Clyde for the mortgage age. But instead of bullets, they used ballpoint pens. Instead of blood, they left behind paper trails. Together, they scammed millions. Together, they stayed invisible. But the thing about partnerships built on lies? Eventually, someone slips. It started as a hustle. Then it became a business. But now, it was a tour. Matthew Cox didn't just stay in Florida. He went nationwide, from Tampa to Atlanta, Charlotte to Nashville. He became a phantom investor, haunting the real estate markets of the American South. Each stop was the same, but different. New city, new alias, new condo with marble counters, and a view of the skyline. He'd walk into banks like a VIP, flashing a flawless credit report, forged pay stubs, glowing letters from companies that didn't exist. He was Gary Sullivan in Georgia, Joseph Carter in North Carolina, Michael White in Tennessee. Every name had a story. Every story had a purpose. He bought houses under one identity, refinanced them under another, and then sold them to a third. Sometimes, all three were him. The banks? They never saw it coming. He called it shotgunning. A blitz of loan applications, all tied to the same property, just filed under different names. By the time the wires cleared, the house had 3 mortgages, and he was gone. Gone to another city. Gone to another name. Gone before the banks realized the house was empty. He used the same tactics in every town. Mailboxes rented under fake names. Phone lines routed to burner cells. Storage units packed with disguises, documents, laptops. And always, Rebecca was by his side. She wasn't just helping, she was executing. Posing as his wife one day, his secretary the next. She'd call banks, answer verification questions, even sign documents as someone else entirely. They lived out of hotels and furnished rentals, always paid for in cash or under names that didn't trace. Sometimes, they'd rent a luxury unit just to stage it. Hang pictures, set up furniture, make it look like a real home for the mortgage officer. Then they'd vanish, gone before the ink dried. City after city, they left a trail of broken lenders and bouncing checks, a digital ghost town of abandoned emails and disconnected phone numbers. But Cox didn't see chaos. He saw art. Every forged document was a brushstroke. every alias a character in his living novel. He wasn't just faking paperwork. He was rewriting reality. At one point, he had over 40 open loans, all under different identities, all active, all profitable. He lived like a millionaire, but paid nothing that could be traced. No taxes, no accountability, no trail. And still, the banks kept saying yes, because Matthew Cox knew the game better than anyone, and as long as he kept moving, he couldn't lose. But every tour has an encore, and every encore has a curtain call. Somewhere out there, the dots were starting to connect, and someone, somewhere, was following the paper trail he thought he'd buried. It was bound to happen. When you lie to one bank, you might get away with it. Lie to two, maybe still. But lie to dozens across multiple states under different names? Eventually, someone notices. And that's exactly what happened. Somewhere in a corporate office in Atlanta, an underwriter flagged something strange. A signature on a loan in Georgia looked identical to one on a loan from Florida. Different names. Same handwriting. Too perfect. Then another red flag popped up. A condo in Charlotte sold 3 times in 6 months, with 3 different borrowers. All suspicious. All too clean. The banks started whispering. Compliance teams started comparing. And somewhere inside a cubicle, someone picked up the phone. The call went to the FBI. That's when everything changed. A special agent, trained to spot financial fraud, was assigned to the case. He didn't see a few bad loans. He saw a pattern. The same types of properties, the same forged employment letters, the same crisp formatting, down to the pixel. Different names, but the same hand behind them all. They didn't know who he was yet, but they knew what he was doing. And so, the FBI began pulling files, property records, phone logs, IP addresses. Every fake document became a breadcrumb. Every mortgage application, a clue. The scope was massive. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. Millions of dollars in active loans. Dozens of open identities. One man. They dubbed him the Phantom of Real Estate. The media didn't know about it yet, but in every office he'd touched, there were agents now digging. They started canvassing banks, asking questions, interviewing loan officers, requesting security footage, following email trails to dummy accounts. Everywhere they looked, he had already been there. And he hadn't just fooled banks, he'd fooled systems, credit bureaus, title companies, even state agencies. He was a ghost in plain sight. And he was still moving. The FBI placed him on a watch list. Secret Service flagged him as a priority case. They issued internal bulletins with his known aliases, but they couldn't agree on a face, because there were too many. One day, he was a clean-cut businessman in glasses. The next, a tanned retiree with bleached hair. Sometimes heavy, sometimes slim. He morphed like smoke, and every time they thought they were close, he was already gone. Changing addresses, changing women, changing names. But no matter how many lives he created, the agents knew there was one real man behind it all. One fingerprint, one mistake. That's all it would take. And then, just like that, his name went public. Matthew Cox, a mortgage broker from Tampa with a degree in art. A man who didn't fit the profile. Didn't fit the crime. Didn't fit any mold they'd ever seen. He was charming, educated, disarming, and extremely dangerous. Now, there was a warrant, a task force, and a clock ticking. Because for the first time, Matthew Cox knew they were close. So he did what he always did best. He disappeared. He felt it in the pit of his stomach, the headlines, the agents. The eyes that used to look past him now lingered too long. His aliases had gotten sloppy, the signatures too similar, the stories too rehearsed. Matthew Cox wasn't stupid. He knew the storm was coming. So he vanished. He cut off old identities like dead weight, closed every burner phone, scrubbed every email. He and Rebecca left behind everything: apartments, cars, bank accounts, all replaced within days. They slipped into Tennessee, quiet, rural, Forgettable. A town where no one asked questions because no one cared. They rented a small home under yet another name, Gary Sullivan, this time. He had new documents, new history, even new fingerprints. He'd learned how to fake them, use rubber casts, transfer prints from silicone pads, enough to pass a casual swipe, enough to fool a cheap scanner. He lost weight, changed his hairstyle, started wearing glasses he didn't need. And Rebecca? She dyed her hair, wore plain clothes, learned to keep her head down. They didn't go out much, didn't draw attention, only used cash. No emails, no phones, no paper trails. But even in hiding, Cox couldn't help himself. He got bored, and when he got bored, he wrote a manuscript. He called it The Associates, a fictional tale based on a man who ran a fraud empire built on false identities. A man who outsmarted the system. A man who always got away. Sound familiar? He printed it out at a local Staples, mailing copies to agents, journalists, publishers, taunting them, flirting with exposure. Because even in hiding, Cox wanted to be seen. And while he hid in plain sight, the FBI was circling closer. They didn't know exactly where he was, but the net was tightening. Fraud alerts had gone national. His face was on government bulletins. Loan officers were briefed on what to watch for. But what brought him down in the end wasn't a sting operation, wasn't a raid, wasn't even the FBI. It was something no con artist could ever prepare for: a babysitter. It wasn't the FBI, it wasn't surveillance, it wasn't a forensic audit or a secret wiretap. It was a babysitter. In the quiet Tennessee town where Cox and Rebecca had gone underground, they tried to live a normal life, whatever normal meant for two fugitives. They used new names, new routines, rented a modest house tucked away from busy streets, tried not to stand out, but they had a child to care for, Rebecca's young son. And like any working couple, they needed help. So they hired a local babysitter. She was smart, observant, and something didn't sit right. At first, it was little things. The names they used didn't match the mail. The stories about their past were vague, too vague. Matthew, now Gary, was always evasive, always smiling, but never real. He claimed to be in real estate, but didn't seem to work. There were no open listings, no office calls, just a printer running day and night. The babysitter grew curious. One evening, after putting the boy to bed, she glanced at paperwork left on the counter. A driver's license, a social security card, a mortgage application. All with different names, all slightly off. She didn't say anything that night, but when she got home, she Googled him. She didn't search for Gary Sullivan. She searched for the address, the company name, a few phrases from the paper she remembered. And then, there it was. Wanted. Matthew Cox. Mortgage fraud. Millions stolen. Last seen in Florida. Suspected to be traveling with a female accomplice. Rebecca's face was on the bulletin too. The babysitter froze. Everything clicked at once. The forged papers, the fake names, the too smooth charm. She wasn't watching a child for a real estate agent. She was working for America's most wanted con man. The next day she made the call. The FBI took it seriously. They'd been chasing shadows for months. Now, finally, a lead. Within 48 hours, surveillance was in place. Agents watched the house, tracked their routines, and on a quiet morning, they moved in. Matthew Cox didn't resist, didn't run, didn't fight. He answered the door wearing khakis and a calm expression. Introduced himself, again, as Gary Sullivan, but the badge didn't care. The cuffs clicked like thunder. It was over. Years of lies, dozens of names, millions in fraud. And in the end, he was brought down by a babysitter who trusted her gut. It was quiet. No helicopters, no battering rams, no shouting through bullhorns. Just a knock at the door, and a man standing there in khakis with a calm smile, like nothing was wrong, but everything was. Behind the smile was Matthew Cox, Behind him, a house full of lies. The agents didn't hesitate. They asked his name. He said, "Gary Sullivan." One last lie. They cuffed him anyway. No drama, no fight. Just the hollow stillness of a man who knew the game was over. Inside the house, they found everything. Forged IDs, stacks of documents, fake employment records, printouts of loan applications, a personal archive of his own fraud. It was a museum of crime, and Matthew Cox was the curator. They brought him in, processed him, and for the first time in years, he was just one man. No aliases, no masks, no more rewrites. Rebecca Hawk was arrested days later. She didn't run, didn't beg, didn't say much of anything. Together, they had traveled across 5 states, stolen more than $25 million, and created dozens of identities. Now, they were facing the truth. The FBI began unraveling the full scope. 9 states, over 100 forged documents, more than 40 fake identities. Every loan had a fake name. Every name had a fake story. Every story had one author, Matthew Cox. In court, he tried to explain. He talked about dyslexia, about being overlooked, about how lying had been his survival instinct. But the prosecutors didn't buy it. He wasn't a victim. He was a manipulator, a master of deception. And now, his biggest illusion, that he could outrun justice forever, was gone. In 2007, he was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. Rebecca got 6. He tried to appeal, tried to rewrite the ending, like he always did. But this story was no longer his to write. For the first time in his life, Matthew Cox couldn't forge his way out. He entered prison not as Matthew Cox, but as an idea, a legend of white-collar crime. Other inmates had heard the stories. Some didn't believe them. Others asked for advice. "How'd you do it? Can you teach me?" He wasn't feared like a gangster. He was admired, in a twisted way. Because in a world built on rules, he was the guy who had broken them all and made it look easy. But the walls didn't care. They didn't care about the perfect signatures, or the fake tax returns, or how many banks he fooled. In prison, no one is a ghost. There's only one name, one number, one reality. Still, Cox stayed busy. He wrote. First letters, then essays, then full manuscripts. He picked up the same pen he used to ruin banks. But now, he used it to confess, not just to the crimes, but to the obsession, the addiction to manipulation, the thrill of creating fake lives that obeyed him, even when his real life never had. He published articles behind bars, wrote a memoir, started pitching screenplays based on his story, and when the outside world began to take interest, he leaned in. TV producers came calling. He appeared on American Greed, Dateline, Forbes, and more. He became a minor celebrity, a cautionary tale wrapped in charisma. People wanted to hear from him, to know how he did it, to see if he'd changed. And what did he do? He told them. In long interviews, with practiced ease, he talked about the fraud, the schemes, the mindset. He seemed open, transparent. But if you listened closely, you could still hear it. The twist in every sentence. The way he reshaped the truth. Just enough to stay interesting. Just enough to stay in control. Because that's what Matthew Cox always wanted. Control. Even without freedom, even in a cell, he still wanted to own the story. In 2020, after more than a decade behind bars, he was released early due to COVID protocols. He walked out older, quieter, but not erased. He started a YouTube channel, began telling stories of fraud, his and others, teaching people how cons work, warning them maybe, entertaining them, definitely. He called it redemption. Some call it monetizing crime. Others call it a long con that never ended. Because here's the question no one can answer. Can a man who spent his whole life lying ever truly tell the truth? Matthew Cox didn't need a weapon, he didn't need a gang, he didn't even need to raise his voice. He used charm, paper, ink, and trust. That was the most dangerous thing he ever forged. Trust. He didn't rob banks. He convinced banks to rob themselves. He didn't steal identities. He built them, name by name, lie by lie, until even he forgot where the truth ended and the illusion began. To some, he's a cautionary tale, proof that the system can be manipulated by anyone clever enough to try. To others, he's a symbol of how broken that system really was. A man with no violence in his record, but millions in damage behind him. Now, he walks free, making videos, telling stories, explaining the very fraud that once made him a fugitive. Some say he's changed, reformed, repentant. Others see something else. The same smooth tone, the same sly grin, the same ability to make you believe, even when you shouldn't. Because the truth about Matthew Cox is this: he didn't just forge documents, he forged reality. And when someone lives so long in fiction, can they ever come back? Or are they always writing the next version of themselves, one signature at a time? This is the story of Matthew Cox, a man who made fraud look like art, and almost got away with all of it. Almost.